Ebgp configuration. So in this slide I will be explaining to you that what are the different ways we should be able to configure the Ebgp. Okay, so there are two ways that Ebgp can be configured. It can be a directly connected or it can be a indirectly connected. So first of all, let me explain it to you how we can use the directly connected neighbor. So what is directly connected neighbor? Let's say for instance we have the router R1 and then R2, and these two routers are physically connected with the help of a physical cable. Okay, so when we say that the two devices are directly connected point to point, it means the two devices belongs to a single subnet. Let's say we have the subnet 192.168.1.0/24. We have 1.1 and we have 1.2. So these two devices are directly connected with the help of a physical link, and this is the subnet, and these two devices are belongs to a single subnet. So it means they are directly connected. So when we will use the Ebgp configuration in terms of the directly connected neighbor, so the Cisco IOS has been designed in such a way that when we will use the command at R1 and specify R2 is our neighbor, and when we will go to R2 and specify R1 is our neighbor, so Cisco IOS will presume that these two devices are directly connected. It means these two devices are connected with the help of a single physical cable, and these two devices belongs to a single subnet. Okay, so this is the default behavior of the Cisco IOS. Okay, and how we can configure neighborship? We just need to use the neighbor command. We have to go to the R1 and use the neighbor command. Okay, and the same way we should go to the R2 and use the neighbor command to establish the neighborship. And since we are using the Ebgp, and these two should be a different AS, so let's say for R1 the AS number should be 100, and for R2 the AS number should be 200. Okay, and if we are advertising something, let's say a prefix or a network from R1, let's say we have 10.171.0/24. If we are advertising this subnet from R1 to its neighbor, which is R2, we have to use the network command. So when we will use the network command, this prefix will be advertised from R1 to R2. So we should remember that we should use the network command for advertising the prefix. We should use the neighbor command for setting up the neighborship. Okay, so this is the syntax we should be using in both R1 and R2 while we will set up the neighborship. Let's say we are at R1 and using the command router BGP and the AS number. So AS number should be the AS number which we have for R1, which is 100. The same way we should go to the R2 and specify the router BGP and the AS number of R2, which is 200. Here 200, and then we should use the neighbor and then neighbor IP and the remote AS number. So we should use the command neighbor and we should specify the neighbor IP. The neighbor IP is nothing but the IP address of the router to whom we are forming the neighborship. So now we are at R1 and forming the neighborship with R2. So the IP address of the interface of the R2, which is 1.2. So 192.168.1.2, and then we should use the remote AS number. So remote AS number means the R2 AS number, which is 200. The same case here, we should go to the R2, use the neighbor 192.168.1.1, and then remote AS should be 100. Okay, and as I said, when we will use the network command, if we would like to advertise something from R1 to the R2 or maybe any other neighbor, we should use the network command. We will go to the R1 and use the network and specify the IP address, which is 10.171.0, and then the subnet mask, which is for 244, that is 255.255.255.0. So this is the syntax that we will be using when we will use the neighborship. So once the neighborship will be formed between R1 and R2, we can use the command show IP BGP summary. Okay, so if we use the command at R1 and then R2, which will show us the neighborship that we form. If we use the command at R1, which will show us the R1 has a neighborship with the R2. If we use the command at R2, which will show us the neighborship of the R1 along with the uptime, that for how long the neighborship has been established. So guys, this is just the theory part. So when I will be explaining to you the practical, I will be doing the practical. At that time you will be more clear. So just now you just remember that whenever we will use the neighbor command to make a neighborship between the two devices, and we should use the network command when we advertise the network from one neighbor to the another one. Okay, and if we use the command show IP BGP summary, which will show us the neighborship information along with the uptime. It means since how long the neighbor has been up. Okay, thank you.